Part 2. The fact that 2 plus 2 cannot equal 5 applies to good and evil, because evil can be no more good than 2 plus 2 can make 5. The fundamental point is that if we try to live against Logos, our efforts will be in vain, and our morality is reflected through this. On the one hand, this allows us to better understand the relationship between good and evil in Christianity, and on the other, it allows one to infer what modes of life are allowed by Logos, even if he is not a believer. Let's consider this latter claim first, and explore it in this way. A man tries to find true joy through money, yet after trying 100 times, he finds that true joy is something that he cannot buy. A man tries to use science to live forever, yet after trying 100 times, he finds that he is still mortal. A man tries to draw a three-sided square, but after trying 100 times, he finds that such a thing simply cannot be. Anyone observing these events will be observing what the divine order of things does and does not allow. They can observe that the Logos allows man to pursue money, but it does not allow him to buy true joy with it. That it allows him to try and cheat death, but does not allow him to become a god. Of course, we could point out that the man might be able to become some kind of god, depending on how we define it, and we could point out that trying 100 attempts to win a race doesn't mean that you won't win it on the 101st. However, these issues are beside the point. The main point is that our attempts to live our lives reveal patterns, or, dare we say, rules about what can or cannot be done, which ends can or cannot be reached, and by which means. At this point, it might be too early to use terms like good or evil, or to extract a morality out of these observations. What you can tell, at the least, is that the Logos, even if it is merely cold and mechanical, makes particular demands on our conduct. There are things that it does permit, and things that it does not. It sets parameters for what can or cannot be done, and that is something that all people would need to factor in when they consider what they can regard as right conduct. Now we can move on to Christianity, which does have a set definition of good and evil, that equates the Logos with God and demands particular moral conduct. What relevance does this discussion have for this? Well, we could consider the matter in this way. The murder of innocents would be regarded as evil. Logos allows the murder of innocents. Yet, Logos does not allow for the murder of innocents to be good. The idea is that anything that is genuinely antithetical to Logos cannot be. Yet, we do see that people are murdered and that what we call evil is done. Yet, we might commonly understand evil to be precisely that which is antithetical to Logos. And so, how can it be? The answer forces us to have a more nuanced view of what evil is and to understand why horror exists within God's universe, whilst nothing happens which he has not seen fit to ordain. The answer is this. Just as what we commonly call irrational is not genuinely irrational, what we call evil is not genuinely antithetical to Logos. Instead, what we commonly call evil are attempts to rebel against Logos, the results of which will be just as vain as being irrational. And so, a man tries to murder an innocent child. Is this action evil? Yes. Does it contradict Logos? No. because God allows it to happen. Yet, God is good. Yet, what contradicts Logos cannot be. And so, evil is not antithetical to Logos. Therefore, are we to say that because the existence of evil is in accordance with Logos, that it is, in a sense, good? No, not exactly. Instead, what we would be left to conclude is that good is compatible with evil, or that evil is not simply that which is antithetical to the Logos. Indeed, we would have to conclude this in order for evil to have a place in God's ultimately good scheme. This might be a difficult conclusion, but it allows us to understand how and why God uses evil in order to do good. That all things that happen, even the worst things we see, are always in His hands and flow back to His good and loving purpose. To give this claim more clarity, we can understand it in this way. A man murders a child. It is good that God allows this to happen, because it is good that God gives man free will so that man can be capable of true love. But more importantly, it is good and just that God does not solely allow the child to be murdered, but ensures that the murderer will suffer his consequences for this. Indeed, claiming that evil can still be used to serve the good in no way justifies such a crime. Whilst it serves the good that the crimes can be allowed and punished, it is also good and just that another man should try to thwart the murder, and that this just man, having served the good more directly, should also reap the rewards of his actions. This example allows us to understand not how evil is good, but how and why God can allow evil, how evil can serve the good, and how evil can accord with the Logos, so long as there is justice for the evil that is done. It was claimed above that evil can no more be good than 2 + 2 can make 5, and that still stands. However, what this argument shows is that this kind of evil is not a contradiction to or antithetical to Logos. Finally, then, it would be useful to discuss a different, deeper kind of evil, if we can distinguish between different kinds. After all, if the evil that we've discussed isn't antithetical to Logos, what is? The answer is that if God is Logos, this kind of pure evil would be that which attempts to contradict His will. That a murderer commits a crime does not contradict God's will, because it is according to His will that the murderers be allowed to make their decisions and be punished accordingly. But if a murderer would kill an innocent child and never be punished, that would be a different matter. That would be to contradict God's will, to deny the law that the Logos has ordained. The attempt to make wicked men immortal on earth would be this kind of evil. An attempt to murder children and have it be truly good would be this kind of evil. And we should call them attempts because that is all that they can ever be. Indeed, it is precisely because of the Logos that these things can never be realized, just as surely as 2 + 2 will never equal 5. Again, just because a contradiction can be posited does not mean that it can be true. Hence the plight of the wicked. They will always be trying to do something that cannot be done. They try to pursue lives that cannot be. All the while that they try to right the rules of nature, try to cheat death and kill God, try to regard their murder and their lies and their perversions as good. Despite their best, strongest, and smartest attempts to defy God without consequence, ultimately, all of their efforts will be a waste. It is interesting that the Christian tradition infuses Logos with more ideas. On the one hand, we have reason and the divine order, but on the other, we have Christ, who is the source of life, bodily or spiritual. Our God is the living God and the source of all creation. This fits with all that has been said so far. Anything that is genuinely against Logos cannot be. Anything that works against the living God, that works against Logos, works towards non-being, which is tantamount to death. This might allow us to explain why the devil is the king of the dead. As the adversary of the living God, he is in constant rebellion against Logos and against life itself. And so, death can be his only end. It's as if God sustains all being with life. In fact, he must, because he is the source of all being. He sustains all life with the Logos. Yet, some who are given life persist, for as long as they have it, in their rebellion against it, in their rebellion against the divine order, parasitically feeding upon life as they blaspheme it and try to work against it, as they try to serve anti-Logos, as they try to create death. God gives us all an allotted time to feed upon this life he has given us, and those who accept the Logos accept life and are given it for eternity, and all those who keep trying to reject it are finally given what they are trying to achieve, and are thrown into the arms of death. This is for the same reason that murder cannot be good, for the same reason that a man cannot breathe, yet not breathe, for the same reason that 2 + 2 must make 4 and cannot equal 5. It is because the Logos is the Logos. It is the divine order of all things that defines how they must be. It is the same thing that determines that a square has 4 sides, that rabbits must breathe, and that murder is evil. We do not determine what the Logos is, but we do have our own share in it. We have a faculty that allows us to understand it, to perceive the nature of things, and to live in accordance with it. Whether the questions we are exploring are of simple mathematics or of deep moral significance, they share a common thread because they relate to a common source. The Logos is the Logos, and is the link between our reason, our logic, and life itself. Thank you for your time.